Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of the courage to be seen and why your brand's biggest bottleneck is your need to look polished.
We are stepping right into the operational core of your messaging today, and I want to set the stage here early because as strategic partners looking at how you present yourself to your market, we constantly see this massive, almost heartbreaking disconnect.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
You really do. You've got these incredible entrepreneurs, founders, creators, and this is probably you listening right now, who are executing on absolutely all the standard marketing advice. You know, you're posting consistently, you've got pristine copy, your lighting on your videos is perfect, your website looks like $1,000,000.
But the conversion is completely flat.
Exactly, completely flat.
Right, and let's put actual business metrics to this so we aren't just talking in abstract marketing theories here. What we're really talking about is that you're spending $50, maybe $100 a day on ads. Your click-through rate might even look fine on paper.
Sure, the dashboard says everything is green.
But nobody is actually booking a discovery call. Nobody's replying to your email newsletter. The engagement it's totally hollow, you're getting polite likes, but no real market movement. Today, we're analyzing the StorySell framework, specifically the Courage to be Seen module, because it pinpoints exactly why this happens.
And before we get into the weeds of this specific module, I think we need to frame up what StorySell actually is for the listener who might just be stepping into this methodology.
That's a crucial starting point. StorySell, at its highest level, is a framework designed to bridge the gap between being a commodity and being an authority.
Because most people think selling is about proving competence. StorySell argues that competence is just the baseline. It's the price of entry.
People don't buy from you just because you're confident. They buy from you because they feel understood by you.
Right. And StorySell is the systematic process of extracting the truth of your experience and engineering it into narratives that create that profound feeling of being understood in your prospect.
Which brings us to the specific premise of the Courage to be Seen module. And it's fascinating and honestly incredibly counterintuitive.
It argues that your relentless pursuit of a safe, sanitized, perfectly managed image is the exact mechanism destroying your market authority.
That idea alone completely upends everything we are taught about business. We're taught to put on the armor. But our agenda for this session is to systematically deconstruct why you, as a business owner, likely freeze when you try to share honestly online.
We're going to look at the mechanics of how you inadvertently manage your stories into oblivion.
And then we're going to break down the specific tactical execution of how you reverse this process across your platforms. We want to show you how true market authority is actually built on the courage to be seen in the most ordinary, unguarded moments.
Let's open this up with that foundational quote right at the beginning of the module. It really sets the baseline for everything we're going to discuss today.
Yes, the quote is, "The moment you tell the story you once avoided is the moment you begin to breathe again."
It's a profound statement, particularly in a business context, because we don't usually associate brand strategy or customer acquisition with breathing.
Not at all. We associate it with hustling or grinding.
Exactly. But think about the physiology of holding your breath. When you're holding your breath, you're tense, you're rigid. You are hyper-focused on maintaining a state of control. Your shoulders are up around your ears.
You're burning energy just to stay perfectly still.
Yes. And that is exactly what most creators and business owners are doing with their public image. They're holding their brand's breath. They're terrified of letting a single, unscripted reality slip through the cracks of their marketing facade.
I've done that. I know I've done that. I've sat there with a perfectly good email draft and then spent 45 minutes scrubbing out anything that sounded too opinionated or too real just to make it safe.
You hold your breath, and the audience registers that tension. They might not be able to articulate it in marketing terms, but they sense the rigidity.
They sense they're interacting with a highly guarded avatar rather than a human being.
It's like ad blindness, but for human connection. The framework suggests that the stories we actively avoid telling are the exact pressure valves we need to release to bring oxygen back into our messaging.
Let's talk about the entrepreneurial trap that creates this tension in the first place. Because if you're listening to this right now, maybe you're driving to a client meeting or you're at the gym or you're just sitting at your desk avoiding writing a piece of content, you know this exact feeling.
You sit down at your laptop, you genuinely want to connect, you want to write something that matters.
And then you freeze. The cursor blinks. And what comes out instead?
The material describes it perfectly. The words come out polished, careful, and coded in a tone that feels safe, but not true.
Why is that safety so alluring? And why is it ultimately a trap? Let's break down the psychology here.
The safety is alluring because your brain perceives public visibility as a vulnerability, which, if we look at evolutionary psychology, equates to a survival threat.
When you stand out from the tribe, you risk being exiled from the tribe.
Precisely. So when you sit down to write a post or record a video, your internal risk management system kicks into absolute overdrive. You start running these rapid-fire calculations.
What will my peers in the industry think?
Will a potential high-ticket client judge me? Will this make me look like I don't have it all together?
So to mitigate that perceived risk, you apply a thick layer of polish. You sand down the rough edges of your actual lived experience.
You manage the narrative.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second because I can hear the listener pushing back. Let's say I'm a B2B SaaS founder. I'm selling complex logistics software to enterprise companies. Or let's say I'm a financial advisor handling people's retirement funds.
High-stakes industries.
Right. Doesn't sanding down those rough edges protect my credibility? If I'm managing millions of dollars for someone, they want me to be perfect. They don't want me to be messy.
That is the most common objection we hear, and it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what builds trust. The trap is that while this sanitized version protects you from the fear of criticism, it absolutely insulates you from connection.
You can't build deep resonance from behind a protective wall.
Exactly. The very mechanism you're using to protect your authority is the mechanism rendering you invisible. If you're that B2B SaaS founder, your landing page probably says something like, optimize synergy for frictionless supply chain management.
It's perfect. It's safe.
It's also completely ignorable. Meanwhile, your competitor is closing the deals you want because their founder is on LinkedIn talking about the specific Tuesday they realized their previous supply chain collapsed.
They're sharing the panic of having to personally call 50 angry vendors.
And how that specific nightmare led them to build a better tool.
Wow, yes. The first one is a corporate press release.
Yeah.
The second one is a person who understands my exact pain because they have lived it.
The modern consumer has developed a highly calibrated radar for performance. We are exposed to thousands of commercial messages daily.
So when an audience reads a post that's been carefully managed, softened, and stripped of anything too revealing, their brain instantly categorizes it as advertising.
It's just noise. They recognize the cadence of corporate safety.
This brings us perfectly to the blog post example from the framework. There is this incredible story in the material about a founder, a friend of the author's, who was executing the playbook perfectly on paper.
She was posting consistently every single week.
But she was experiencing zero resonance. She felt completely disconnected from her audience, and her business metrics reflected that. The author notes that when they read the friend's posts, they looked polished enough, but they didn't sound like her.
Let's look at the mechanics of this failure. What is actually happening when we manage a story?
The mechanics of managing a story are subtle, but completely destructive to your conversion rates.
Imagine you have a story about a day everything went wrong in your business. The managed version of that story rushes past the emotional reality of the failure and immediately jumps to the triumphant takeaway.
You deliberately remove the part where you felt incompetent or overwhelmed or terrified because you think it damages your credibility.
You instinctively dress it up as a neat little teachable moment. But by removing the emotional truth, you remove the hook.
The audience reads it and thinks, okay, another perfectly packaged, humble brag success story. And they just keep scrolling.
You're effectively stripping the nutrients out of your own story before you serve it to your audience.
The framework makes a crucial strategic point here. Connection does not and cannot come from managed stories. When your brand's biggest bottleneck is the need to look perfect, the audience senses that they're watching a broadcast rather than participating in a relationship.
They disengage because there's no entry point for them. Perfection is incredibly repellent.
It's slick. There's nothing for the audience to grab onto. It's like trying to climb a glass wall.
That is a great way to put it. If we look at this through the lens of market authority, a managed image actually signals insecurity, not strength.
Because when you're heavily polished, it implies you're terrified of what would happen if people saw the reality.
True authority, counterintuitively, is demonstrated through a relaxed transparency. It's the confidence to say, here is what actually happened, without frantically trying to spin it into a heroic Tony Robbins-style narrative.
The audience trusts the unmanaged story because it aligns with their own lived experience. They know life and business are messy. When you pretend yours isn't, you break trust immediately.
That idea of relaxed transparency actually makes me rethink everything we're taught about peak performance online.
Which brings us right into the case study they break down, what the framework calls the kitchen floor micro-story. Let's set the scene here, because this is where the theory gets real.
The author is sitting across the table from this friend we just mentioned, the one whose polished posts were falling flat and generating zero leads.
The friend had been hiding a specific part of her story for years, but the material makes a very specific, fascinating distinction here about why she was hiding it.
It wasn't because it was intensely dramatic. It wasn't some horrific trauma or a massive bankruptcy.
She hid it because it felt tender in a way she could not quite name.
That word, tender, is the pivot point of this entire strategy. As business owners, we're conditioned to think in massive extremes.
We think we either need to present a flawless victory, or we need to share a massive, catastrophic, sleeping in my car, rock-bottom moment to show our resilience.
But tender occupies the massive space in between those extremes. Tender is the quiet insecurity. It's the lingering doubt. It's the small disappointment that you usually just brush past to get on with your day.
The reason she couldn't quite name it is because we literally lack the vocabulary for these ordinary struggles in the business world.
We're taught to ignore them. We're taught to hustle past them.
But the framework is arguing that this unnamed, tender territory is exactly where your highest leverage lies.
To access that territory, the author uses a very specific strategic prompt. She didn't say, tell me your deepest, darkest secret.
She didn't say, tell me about your biggest business failure.
She asked the friend to describe just one moment from the past month that carried weight.
I want to pause on the constraint of that prompt. Why restrict it to the past month? Why ask for a moment that carried weight rather than a moment that was important or impactful?
The psychology behind that constraint is brilliant. By restricting it to the past month, you bypass the rehearsed origin stories.
Every entrepreneur has their polished how I got started story that they've told on 20 different podcasts or interviews.
It's no longer a living truth, it's a script. Limiting the time frame forces the brain to look at recent, unprocessed reality.
And asking for a moment that carried weight instead of a moment of impact or importance shifts the criteria from external validation to internal emotional resonance.
Weight is a physical sensation. You feel it in your chest. It bypasses the analytical marketing brain that wants to select a story based on how good it will make you look, and directly accesses the emotional truth of your recent experience.
And the friend's answer to that prompt is the absolute core of this entire framework. She hesitated, and then she shared the kitchen floor moment.
She described a night where she came home exhausted, sat on the kitchen floor, and cried solely because she felt unseen in her own life.
We need to really look at the anatomy of this moment, because what's most crucial here is what this moment was not.
Exactly. It wasn't a spectacular moment. It wasn't a catastrophe. Her house hadn't burned down. She hadn't been sued.
She just sat on the linoleum and cried.
It was simply undeniably real. The sheer ordinariness of it is its power. If you're listening to this, you've likely had a kitchen floor moment.
Or a steering wheel moment where you just sit in your parked car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside.
Or a staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. moment. These are the universal, quiet intervals of human friction.
We dismiss them because they don't fit the heroic arc of a standard marketing narrative. But because they are so ordinary, they are universally recognizable by your market.
The text describes what happened immediately after she spoke those words aloud. It says, the room shifted. You could feel the truth of it land.
I want to focus on that phrase. Feel the truth of it land. Why does truth have a physical presence? Why does an unguarded moment change the actual atmosphere between two people or between a brand and its thousands of followers?
It changes the atmosphere because it breaks a pattern of low-level deception. Think about it. When two people are interacting through managed personas, there's a constant hum of cognitive dissonance.
Everyone knows they're watching a performance, but everyone is politely agreeing not to point it out.
When someone suddenly drops the mask and speaks an unvarnished truth, the nervous system of the listener immediately recognizes it. The shift in the room is the sudden alignment between what's being presented and what's actually true.
It's a massive relief. The listener's brain says, finally, something real. I don't have to perform either.
In a digital landscape saturated with artificiality and AI-generated platitudes, a moment of undeniable reality carries immense gravitational pull. It quite literally grounds the interaction.
But here's where we need to make a critical business distinction, because I can see a lot of people getting this wrong. The author told her friend that this raw kitchen floor story was exactly what her audience needed. But they didn't need it for sympathy. They needed it for connection.
Let's break that down. Let's make this incredibly clear, because blurring those two concepts is where most creators go horribly, cringingly wrong when they try to be vulnerable online.
This is perhaps the most vital strategic nuance we will discuss today. Sympathy creates a hierarchy.
Let's use a visual metaphor.
Uh-huh.
Sympathy is standing on a safe, dry balcony, throwing a life preserver down to someone drowning in the water.
You feel bad for them. You're looking down at them from a position of relative comfort.
It's a one-way dynamic that ultimately weakens your authority, because you're essentially asking the audience to rescue you or pity you.
Connection, however, creates a bridge. Connection is taking off your jacket and jumping into the freezing water with them.
When an audience connects with your story, they aren't feeling bad for you. They're feeling recognized by you.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. They don't want your life preserver. They want to know you're swimming in the same ocean.
Exactly. They're looking at your kitchen floor moment and saying, I've been on that exact floor. I know that exact feeling of being unseen.
Connection is a horizontal dynamic. It builds profound, unshakable loyalty because you've articulated a truth they were carrying but perhaps couldn't name themselves.
You aren't asking them to fix you. You're simply proving that you inhabit the same reality they do. That is what makes them trust you enough to buy from you.
And the result of understanding that distinction was immediate for this friend. The next morning, she wrote about that night. But she didn't over-dramatize it. She wrote about it in a simple, ordinary way.
And the outcome. People read it, people felt it, and for the first time in months, she felt understood and her audience finally engaged.
The bottleneck was broken. Not by a massive rebranding campaign, not by hiring a new copywriter, not by a better lighting setup, but by the simple, unadorned reporting of a tender moment.
The mechanism of action there is the simple, ordinary way it was written. She didn't try to extract a massive life lesson from it.
She didn't wrap it in a bow and say, and here are my 3 tips for overcoming kitchen floor crying.
She just presented the truth of the moment. When you write simply about a complex or tender feeling, you leave space for the reader to step into the story.
If you over-explain it or try to manage their reaction to it, you push them out.
By just laying it out plainly, she allowed her audience to project their own experiences onto her framework, creating that sudden, powerful surge of connection.
Which moves us beautifully into how we redefine what market authority actually looks like today, because this completely destroys the peak performance myth.
The core thesis of the module is explicitly stated. The courage to be seen does not arrive in a grand gesture.
Think about how contrary that is to standard industry advice. We're constantly told to craft our epic origin stories, to highlight our massive wins, to show the dramatic before and after.
I was broke, and now I drive a Lamborghini.
Right. The problem with the grand gesture approach is that it is fundamentally unrelatable to the daily lived experience of your consumer.
Your audience doesn't live in a state of constant peak performance or dramatic climax. They live in the quiet, mundane reality of Wednesday afternoons.
When you only share your highest highs or your most dramatic, highly produced lows, you distance yourself from them. You become an archetype rather than a person.
Redefining authority means understanding that true trust isn't built by proving you're superhuman. It's built by proving you're deeply self-aware.
There's a beautiful phrase here that actually gave me goosebumps when I read it. It says, the courage to be seen appears in the quiet willingness to share a truth you once tried to manage away.
I want to explore the power of that quiet moment. Why does the quiet willingness to expose an unguarded space build a more resilient brand than a loud declaration of success?
Because the loud declarations are what get all the likes on LinkedIn.
They get likes, but they don't get loyalty. A loud declaration of success is incredibly fragile. It relies on continuous external validation.
If you build your brand solely on peak performance, you're trapped on a treadmill where you constantly have to outperform your last metric to maintain your authority.
You have to keep getting richer or fitter or more successful. But a brand built on the quiet willingness to share a truth is inherently resilient.
It signals to the market that you don't require a facade to feel secure. It demonstrates a profound internal stability.
When you can comfortably discuss a moment where you felt unseen or unsure or exhausted without needing to immediately justify it or fix it, you project a level of confidence that cannot be faked.
You're telling the audience, I am secure enough in my value that I can show you my humanity.
In a marketplace full of posturing, that is the ultimate form of authority.
So how do you, as the listener, actually find these stories? Because I know people are thinking, okay, I get it, but what's my kitchen floor moment?
The email strategy provided in the material gives us a diagnostic tool. It says the story we hesitate to tell isn't always the most dramatic, it's the one we keep glossing over.
It's the small, seemingly insignificant moment that quietly follows you through the day.
Think about your own week. What's the thought you had while making coffee that made you slightly uncomfortable so you immediately checked your phone to distract yourself? That is the glossed over moment.
It's the friction point. It's the conversation you replayed in your head 3 times while driving. It's the email you drafted to your team and then deleted because it felt too honest.
We're conditioned to treat these moments as irrelevant to our professional lives. We think they're just personal noise.
But the framework is arguing that these moments are the raw material of resonance. They quietly follow you because they carry an unresolved emotional truth.
When you identify the story you are actively glossing over, you are identifying the exact frequency your audience is desperate to hear, because I guarantee you they are glossing over the exact same things in their own lives.
I want to give the listener an actionable strategy right now. We challenge you to identify the hard truth or the specific feeling you have tried to outrun. That's the phrasing used in the Facebook and Instagram execution section.
Why does leaning into the exact feeling you're trying to outrun build a stronger brand?
Because the energy required to outrun that feeling is exhausting your creative output. You're using massive amounts of mental bandwidth to maintain the suppression of that truth.
It's like running apps in the background of your phone. It drains the battery.
When you finally stop running, turn around, and simply acknowledge the feeling, whether it's imposter syndrome, burnout, a sense of isolation, or just a profound lack of clarity about your next quarter, you reclaim all that wasted energy.
More importantly, when you articulate the feeling you were trying to outrun, you invariably find that a huge segment of your audience was running from the exact same thing.
By naming the fear or the friction, you become the leader in that space. You become the person who finally turned the lights on in a dark room.
That creates a bond of loyalty that no polished marketing campaign, no perfect funnel could ever achieve.
Okay, now that we understand the psychology and the immense strategic value of this approach, we have to talk about execution, because philosophy is useless without deployment.
We need to look at how this actually translates into content. The material provides highly specific tactical breakdowns of how to deploy this across different platforms.
Let's look at the distinct formatting provided. It starts with an internal first step, outlined in the email framework. And this is so important because you can't just run to social media and start crying.
Exactly. This is a crucial sequencing point. Before you broadcast, you must process. The immediate call to action in the email framework is to capture that avoided story today.
But look at the specific instruction. Write it gently, truthfully, in your own voice. Not to publish it, but to understand it.
This is a profound distinction. If you write an unguarded story with the immediate goal of publishing it, your internal PR team will automatically step in and start managing the narrative.
You'll start editing for engagement, thinking about keywords, and tweaking the hook before you've even captured the truth.
You have to separate the act of extraction from the act of distribution. You're telling the listener to write it down gently, just to understand it.
What does it actually mean to write a story gently? Because as entrepreneurs, we aren't usually very gentle with ourselves.
That's precisely why it's necessary. Writing it gently means suspending judgment. It means you don't criticize yourself for having felt unseen on the kitchen floor.
You don't try to force a business lesson out of it.
You just report the facts of your emotional experience. I was exhausted. I sat down. I felt invisible.
You write it purely to untangle the knot in your own mind. Once it's on paper, externalized, you can look at it objectively.
Only then can you begin to see the universal elements within it that will connect with your audience. The internal understanding must precede the external sharing. Otherwise, you risk bleeding on your audience rather than connecting with them.
You're just dumping unprocessed emotion, and that makes people recoil.
Let's transition to the short-form video strategy, because I know there's going to be pushback here. The framework gives us exact directions for TikTok or Reels.
It provides a hook. The story you're most afraid to tell is the one people feel the deepest.
And then it provides a very specific visual and audio direction. Say it simply. Say it gently. Your audience connects to truth, not performance.
Now think about the environment of short-form video. It's chaotic, it's fast-paced, it's loud, it's people pointing at floating text and dancing.
Why is this gentle, simple direction so strategically potent in that specific, hyper-stimulated medium.
It functions as a massive pattern interrupt. Think about the user experience. When someone is scrolling through a feed of highly produced, frantic, shouting videos with jump cuts every 2 seconds, their brain becomes numb to the noise.
It all blurs together. If you suddenly appear on screen, sitting quietly, not moving much, speaking in a calm, unhurried, gentle tone about a truth you've avoided sharing, it creates an immediate, jarring contrast.
The stillness commands attention in a way that volume never could. You aren't fighting for their attention with chaos. You are securing their attention with gravity.
The instruction to say it simply, say it gently, is a tactical directive to strip away all the performative artifacts that usually signal this is content. When you remove the performance, what remains is a genuine human interaction.
And the hook itself. The story you're most afraid to tell is the one people feel the deepest, is highly self-referential. It names the exact dynamic we're discussing.
It immediately qualifies the viewer. It filters out the people who just want a quick dopamine hit or a dance trend, and it captures the people who are craving actual resonance.
Now let's look at the social media framing for text-based platforms like Facebook or Instagram. The copy structure highlights the paradox of storytelling. Most people avoid the exact story that would create the deepest connection.
Let's do a real example here to make this concrete. Let's take a fitness coach. What does the bad, polished version look like versus the tender version?
Perfect. The bad polished Instagram caption from a fitness coach looks like this. Consistency is key. Even when I didn't feel like working out this morning, I remembered my why and pushed through my limits. You can too. No excuses.
Yeah.
Link in bio for my 30-day shred.
It's sterile. It's a cliche. The audience has read it 10,000 times. Immediate scroll. Now, let's look at the unmanaged tender version based on this framework.
Right. It would sound something like, I sat on the edge of my bed for 20 minutes this morning, staring at my running shoes, actively hating them. I'm a fitness coach, and I didn't want to move. I felt like an imposter because I'm supposed to be the motivated one. I ended up just doing a 10-minute walk. That's the reality today.
Exactly. Look at the difference. The copy structure for Facebook and Instagram outlined in the source material is designed to be a bridge.
It explicitly states, not because it is too painful, but because it reveals something real.
By stating this, you're educating your audience on the value of honesty while simultaneously demonstrating it. You're telling them that honesty builds the bridge, and then you're walking across it by sharing your own quiet moment.
It frames the unmanaged story not as a messy confession, but as an offering of solidarity.
To synthesize all of these tactical executions, we have to establish a very clear boundary. The framework is advocating for revealing something real. It is absolutely not advocating for disclosing everything indiscriminately.
We need to explore that line because crossing it is dangerous. What is the difference between revealing a truth that builds connection and simply oversharing in a way that damages your brand?
The difference is intention and processing. Disclosing everything indiscriminately is often an act of seeking external regulation. You're dumping unprocessed, raw emotions onto your audience and hoping they will fix how you feel.
That's the sympathy trap we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
It's messy, it lacks boundaries, and it makes the audience incredibly uncomfortable because it forces them into the role of your therapist.
Revealing something real, on the other hand, is intentional. It's a story you have already processed, which is exactly why that first step of writing it down just to understand it is so critical.
You're sharing a tender truth, not because you need the audience to save you, but because you know the audience needs to hear it, to feel less alone in their own struggles.
Oversharing is about your need for the audience. Revealing something real is about the audience's need for the truth.
That distinction is exactly why this strategy requires courage. It requires the courage to look at your own unmanaged moments, process them internally, and then offer them simply and cleanly to your market.
It's the realization that your humanity is not a liability to your professional authority. It's the very foundation of it.
When you stop softening the rough edges and trying to outrun your own reality, you eliminate the bottleneck. You allow your audience to finally see you, and in doing so, you allow them to feel seen.
The operational takeaway here, the thing you need to remember when you close out of this session, is that your current polished image is likely costing you the exact engagement and loyalty you're trying so hard to manufacture.
The friction you feel when you try to write something real, the hesitation before you hit publish on something unpolished, is the indicator that you're moving in the right direction.
The goal is not to become a radically vulnerable open book who shares every passing thought. The goal is to systematically locate the small, tender truths you've been managing away and integrate them back into your communication.
That's how you transition from being a static, ignorable brand to becoming a dynamic, resonant authority. We want to leave you with a final strategic challenge, something to explore on your own that builds directly on what we've unpacked today.
We want you to look back over the last 30 days of your life. Not your business metrics, not your content calendar, but your actual lived days.
What is the specific, quiet moment? Perhaps a moment of hesitation, a flash of frustration, or a sudden realization of exhaustion that you're actively refusing to look at. Identify that moment.
And then challenge yourself to realize that the exact feeling you're trying to hide from your audience is the exact bridge your audience is waiting to cross.
If you're ready to align your story with the person you're becoming, visit 365 Freedom online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.